What is up? Good morning and welcome to WireTapped, Club Fantasy's weekly waiver wire show. 10 weeks down. We are about a month away from the fantasy playoffs. The injuries continue to pile up, and to make matters even worse, the waiver wire is looking pretty thin. Isn't fantasy football fun? Let's get into it. What is up? Good morning and welcome to WireTapped. It is time to discuss the Week 11 waiver wire. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, matching. We did not plan this. We don't talk to each other before.
I mean, did we though?
We don't talk to each other before 10:55 on any given morning. Josh and I both wearing orange shirts. Josh Hudson, how you doing this morning, my friend?
Oh man, getting ready for a crazy waiver wire. That's for sure. It's gonna be. This is crunch time, baby. We got two big bye weeks coming up in week 12 and 14, so people need to get ahead of it.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Josh, that I did not really take into account when I was putting our list together. If ever there was a week, folks, that you have to get ahead, it's week 11. Week 12, there are 6 teams on bye. Most of them are good fantasy assets. Week 14, there are another 4 teams on bye, if I remember correctly. Definitely, yeah, there's 4 teams on bye. Fantasy assets. Ramondre Stevenson, obviously not that great. Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson, Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin, all in week 14. And then the Baltimore Ravens, Josh, which have just been a plethora of fantasy points recently, they're going to be on bye on week 14. You guys now need to be looking ahead if the playoffs are on your radar, especially if you're one of those weird leagues, Josh, that still starts the playoffs on week 14.
Yeah, there were some leagues that didn't make the adjustment when the league moved up to 17 games. So definitely need to take that into account as well.
If you're one of our small viewing audience that is a part of Scott Fishbowl, playoffs are starting very soon, and it's very likely Ryan's getting bounced in week 14 because my quarterback situation is a nightmare, and in Bo Nix, I trust Millie. Hopefully he can get me enough on the average scores to keep me alive.
You know what? I don't need you bragging about making the Scott Fishbowl playoffs, jackass.
I'm relatively sure I've only missed the Scott Fishbowl playoffs one time. Pretty happy about that.
I still haven't made the playoffs in that damn tournament.
We're going to get you in there eventually, Josh. All right, guys.
I got to go 3-1 in the next 2 weeks. I can do this.
There you go. This show is all about taking a look back at last week, seeing what we learned and how it's going to affect where you are spending your fab, or if you're going to blow your waiver priority heading into week 11. Let's start with, by the way, one of our sponsors. We do partner with Trophy Smack. And if you guys are looking for end of season trophies for your commissioner, for your league winner, or for the champion of women of fantasy football in your life, you can see Josh holding up the new belt, white belt, rose gold emblems. I got the old black belt with the silver emblems. A lot of really cool stuff you guys can get from Trophy Smack. And if you're going to do it, why not help out your favorite show? If you use promo code WOFF or just click the link in the description of this video, you'll be able to get partner. You'll see some of our exclusive line and things that are going to help out Club Fantasy, and we get a little cut of whatever you spend there, like the very cool belt that Josh is holding. So make sure you guys check that out. Link in the description of the video or promo code WOFF. Special thanks to Trophy Smack as always. Josh, we like to start off with the quick news. Might be the best fucking news I've heard all day. We were speculating on it yesterday, so at least the Chicago Bears have done one thing right, and it actually stopped me from dropping Caleb Williams in a league because Shane Waldron has been dropped as the offensive coordinator. Former running backs coach from the Rams and Carolina OC Thomas Brown will take over, which usually means good things for the running backs. If I remember Thomas Brown's history, he took over as the play caller from Frank Reich in Carolina, but that wasn't obviously a great situation there, Josh.
Yeah, definitely a lot more running back focus, so that should mean great things for DeAndre Swift. And let's be honest, this Bears offense needs to get back on track. Caleb Williams needs to get more confidence, and you do that by controlling the clock and try to build a lead. The running back share that DeAndre Swift has been accumulating this season, it is very dominant. You know, we talked a little bit earlier in the season about the strength of schedule for running backs and Swift's schedule not looking so hot. It has since gotten better with the way the defenses have turned. So I think this is an opportunity where they can get right with DeAndre Swift. If you're a DeAndre Swift fantasy manager, things are really looking up with Thomas Brown as the offensive coordinator or play caller at minimum going forward. But hopefully, crossing fingers, this means that the wide receivers can actually do something and he can open up the offense a little bit more by establishing the run.
Yeah, honestly, as much as I think Thomas Brown is good for the running backs, I think you almost have to come out and let Caleb Williams sling it for a week just to prove I'm not Shane Steichen and I'm not going to fuck this, or Shane Waldron, and I'm not going to fuck this offense all the way up. Like, I feel like you have to do that for week 1 is get DJ Moore happy again, get Caleb Williams happy again. Like, DeAndre Swift's going to get his, don't get me wrong, but you have to prove that this is a new regime immediately, because right now, you got to feel bottom of the barrel after you spend a first round pick on this kid and they just do nothing outside of 2 weeks this entire season, Josh.
Yeah, it's been rough, and that's being polite. Like we mentioned a little bit yesterday, the top 3 options in that offense, all with a 20% target share. Remember how we thought that Cole Kmet might be a thing even as a 4th option? Yep, there goes that idea.
Yep. They don't know what they're doing on offense. They looked blind. And again, I go back to something, Josh, a quote that I missed. Jackson Smith-Njigba tried to tell us about this. He tried to tell us that Waldron, he was so happy Waldron was gone. You don't often hear that about offensive coordinators, but JSN had his finger on the pulse, and it worked out really poorly for the Chicago Bears. But hey, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Shane Waldron, no longer employed. Here's hoping. Top 5 waiver ads from Britt's article. Article dropped this morning on clubfantasyffl.com. Britt gives you her top 5. We're going to talk about some of these guys. We already have a question in the chat that covers the guy that we planned on talking about to begin with. Britt gave you a quarterback this week, Justin Herbert. He's out there in about 45% of leagues on Yahoo, 50% on ESPN, 45 on Sleeper. Quentin Johnston. We've been resisting this. Britt addresses it in her article. We don't love the touchdown dependency of Quentin Johnston, but he's more and more involved every week. It's probably time to stop resisting. He's out there in about 60% on Yahoo, 55 on ESPN, 40% on Sleeper. Adonai Mitchell looks involved, and Michael Pittman is hurt. He's out there in 90% of all leagues. Trey Benson out there in 80% of leagues. It just depends on how you feel about James Conner. We talked about this on yesterday's show a little bit. I don't think Conner can play the whole season. Benson's only been filling in garbage time. But I think the one everybody wants to talk about, Josh, I'll throw the bonus pick out there, is Devon Vele. Clearly a second option to Cortland Sutton for the Broncos, but the Broncos offense is up and coming. But speaking of that Broncos offense, Josh, Audric Estime is going to be the talk of the town. We already have our question, which I'll pop up on the screen here after I get off of the show sheet. 96 available on Yahoo, 99 available on ESPN, 93 available on Sleeper. And Little Tay the Rock, Josh, immediately says his current running backs are Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, and Bucky Irving. So he's not in a bad spot at running back at all, but he also has number 1 waiver priority. And as I mentioned in the intro, waivers are fucking dry. Does he drop one of these wide receivers, Deontay Johnson, Xavier, where they to grab Audric Estime and just shore up the running back and probably play keep away from the rest of his league?
Honestly, I'm fine with dropping either of them. The way that Xavier Worthy has not been involved in this offense, the whole reason that you were hanging on to him was because he's attached to Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes hasn't looked like Patrick Mahomes this year. Nope. So he's pointless there. Deontay Johnson ran all of 3 routes this week in his second week with the Ravens. Like, he's just not being a focal point in this offense. So I'm fine dropping either of them. I guess I would prioritize dropping Deontay only because there's still that X factor with Worthy and he does score touchdowns. But yeah, more than happy to go get Audric Estime. But here's the long and short of Audric Estime, right?
Yeah.
Led the team in rushing attempts in week 10. He had a 64% running back share. That's great. Little usage in the passing game. Not great. Basically, this is Tank Bigsby, right? First, second down bruiser, limited usage in the passing game. Julian McLaughlin, very small guy, but he's the guy that's going to get the passing down work. He's that scat back. That's how they use him. Long and short, RIP Javonte Williams. It was a good run, buddy. Sucks, but you know what? You'll have more opportunities later.
I don't have
it. Go ahead. Sorry.
I don't have it in front of me, but I was looking at the running back rankings over the last 4 games, and Javonte is like a top 25 running back, I think.
Yeah, because he had a huge game against the Saints.
Oh, so it was.
And the following week was Carolina, where he didn't do shit.
Well, no, I mean,
Yeah.
yes and no. For fantasy, 26 against the Saints, you're absolutely right. 9 and then 10. Obviously, this week they shut him down. It's just funny that Javonte was a mild fantasy asset as an RB2, and now he's just poof,
Yeah, he's just toast.
gone.
Yeah,
So
he's absolutely toast. But this is what I found really interesting, and I'll give a shout out to Ryan Heath over at Fantasy Points for digging this one up for us. But he poses the question: could this be a hot hand approach, which we have seen with Sean Payton in the past, right? So Audric Esme did not have a carry in this game until the third drive of the game. So he wasn't initially in the main.
This was not the plan.
Yeah, exactly. This wasn't actually the plan. His first 3 touches on this drive, 8 yards, 6 yards, 10 yards. So he was showing, hey, I got this. I'm explosive. We can roll with this. And then it was all she wrote from there. If I had to guess, Estime is probably going to be in on the first or second drive this week.
Yeah.
And moving forward, he's going to get more opportunity. Yes, you should be picking up Estime because running backs on waivers at this time of year, if they're getting any level of touches, they need to be on your bench, plain and simple. So I'm perfectly fine dropping some of these back end wide receivers a la Deontay Johnson, Xavier Worthy on your rosters that you clearly are not going to start. And in this instance, Tay, you don't necessarily need to play Estime, but again, if Barkley goes down, Mixon's already missed time with an injury. Jacobs has been banged up. Bucky is getting some run, which is great. Who knows when things are going to flip, right? It helps to have that level of insurance that Deontay and Xavier Worthy are not having.
Yeah.
Or providing for your team, excuse me.
Josh, I noticed a little pushback for you on Adonai Mitchell. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, third among wide receivers on the Colts in target share, right? Like this was Josh Downs. This was Alec Pierce. Adonai basically took over, Michael Pittman's role on the outside. He's young. He's explosive. He can make plays, which is what he did. The touchdown went to Alec Pierce. The volume went to Josh Downs. He's a supporting player, right? He's not going to be, a main cog in this offense. I love the fact that he caught all 6 of his targets. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Alec Pierce has always been more of the downfield guy. So I think when you're looking in terms of that, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs with the production because, he'll see 7 targets, but only catch 4 of them. But that's why he's averaging 20 yards per reception and has 84 yards in the touchdown because he actually caught that touchdown, right? So, I'm not somebody that I'm going to be rushing to go get Adonai Mitchell because I'm looking at the pecking order, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing when we're considering tight ends in fantasy. We want them as a number 1, number 2 option. We know that Joe Flacco is going to throw the football. We know that the Colts they're not the best team right now. So they're going to probably continue to throw. And as a result, that third pass catching option will have some value. But when are you ever going to feel comfortable starting Adonai Mitchell if Michael Pittman's out?
And that's kind of where I stood with it is Josh Downs is the only startable asset at wide receiver on that team. And so, and again, I barely feel comfortable with that because Joe Flacco sucks. So, and then,
well, I mean, he's a 40-year-old quarterback. Like it is what it is, right? And truthfully, the team around him just isn't that good either. The offensive line has regressed. Jonathan Taylor hasn't been as dominant as we've seen in the past. And a lot of that is because the surrounding pieces around him just haven't been getting the job done. So defenses are allowed to focus on him.
Yep. All right, guys, we're going to knock out a couple of questions that I see in the chat. Fair warning, folks. We have a hard out at 12:30 today. So get your questions in early if you want them answered. We don't typically miss questions, but if we get to 12:25, I'm ending the show and we'll have to get to you guys on the Wednesday show. But if you have the questions, get them in, waiver or not. As Daniel throws out there, a non-waiver question. We don't care. We're just here to help you guys. Got the W last week. Congratulations. We appreciate it. We appreciate you tuning in to get our advice. Not a waiver wire question, but do they give up Lamar, CeeDee Lamb, and Tony Pollard for Jamar Chase and Bijan Robinson? I think our first and only question here is who's your other quarterback? Because the CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard for Jamar Chase, Bijan is an enormous win. Can you survive the loss of Lamar Jackson? So who's your other quarterback? I'm going to leave your question starred. We're going to come back to that. Deborah wants to know, Mayfield's on bye this week. The other quarterback is Sam Darnold. Do I stick with him or drop him for the rest of the season? I'm confused here, Deborah. Do you mean to drop Baker? Because I'm not dropping Baker. Do you mean to drop Darnold and go get someone else as your 1 week replacement? And
that's how I'm
case,
interpreting
Josh,
this.
I'm making that move all day. Spoiler alert of who we have listed as our quarterbacks. If Justin Herbert from the article, Russell Wilson, Bo Nix are out there, I'm making this drop immediately, Josh.
Yeah. It truly depends on which quarterbacks are going to be available. Maybe this is a 1 week aberration for Sam Darnold, but you know what? Maybe it's not. We've seen enough bad Sam Darnold to know that this could very easily be a trend, right? Honestly, I'm surprised he's been good for 9 weeks this season because I didn't think he was going to be great otherwise.
Well, let's be clear. He's been good. Oh, no, you did say 9 weeks. Okay. Because he was not good in week 10. But yes, you're absolutely right. 9 weeks. So.
Well, I guess really 8 games because
8 games,
Vikings have already had their bye week.
Oh, you were right, though. 9 weeks.
So I'm fine doing that. Again, it just kind of depends on the depth of the league. Is this 8-team, 10-team, 12-team, 14, 16, etc. If it's a 14 or 16 team league, there may not be better options on waivers, but if it's a 10 or 12, I think some of the guys that we'll get to in the quarterback section, like you said, Russ, Justin Herbert.
He didn't even make the list, but Geno Smith, I want to throw out there. I don't know if he was too rostered.
Yeah, there were some people that were likely dropping him because the Seahawks were on a bye. All right, she does chime in. Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, Bo Nix on waivers. Bo Nix is somebody we absolutely love. I would 100% go get Bo Nix.
Go get Bo Nix. Absolutely. That's the one I would say as well. Geno Smith is 50% available, so I'll add him when we get to the quarterback section. Folks, if you've never watched this show before, we are going to do the best we can with waivers. We love to answer your questions. We prioritize that. We start off with our top 5 waiver claims. We will get to the rest of the waivers at the end of the show, towards the end of the show, but we are also never going to ignore any questions. And that brings us to Caesar, Josh, who wants to know, is this the best time to buy low on Breece Hall and CeeDee Lamb? And I think that's 100% a yes. You actually talked about Breece Hall. You talked about Breece Hall in redraft. So
yeah, I talked about Breece Hall a little bit yesterday in redraft. Honestly, we know about the down tick, but you could very easily convince a dynasty manager, especially if that dynasty manager is contending and Breece Hall isn't really helping them win. I honestly had this thought process with CeeDee Lamb this morning. And I'm like, I've got CeeDee Lamb on a lot of contending dynasty teams. There's a high probability that he's probably going to sink one of these teams because he just doesn't have the upside that we would see with a Dak Prescott, right? Cooper Rush, Trey Lance, if they end up coming in, they don't have the support of the running game. So even if CeeDee Lamb gets that 30+% target share like he did in week 10 with those guys, what's it turning into? Less than 10 fantasy points?
Exactly.
That's not winning you anything in Dynasty. If I can turn Lamb, even at a small dip in value, if I can turn him into, I don't know, a Drake London plus a little bit of a downtick, maybe I get a first round pick, maybe I get another running back or depth or whatever, I think I would consider making that trade. So yeah, if you are, maybe a non-contender and you want to see what you can, buy CeeDee Lamb for, because if you can get him at less than peak value, I would 1000% do that.
Yeah, I think that's the right move. I agree wholeheartedly. This is the time to buy. This is the time to buy in Dynasty in general. I have leagues where there have been almost no trades this season where all of a sudden I'm seeing 5 and 6 trade offers coming in. So make sure you're the one sending the offers. Don't wait on other people to send you an offer. Go out there and make that offer. Coming back to Daniel's question, Josh, he does not have a backup quarterback. So I'm going to bring his first question back up. This is the Lamar, CD, Tony Pollard for Jamar Chase and Bijan. He does have Bo Nix available on waivers. So let's go on the assumption, Josh, and it's a big assumption, that he can get Bo Nix. So just throw Bo Nix's name into this trade, Josh. Are you doing this trade?
Yeah, 1,000 times out of 1,000.
Yeah, I think so.
Because even the drop from Lamar to Nix, that's not going to supersede the point production increase that you're getting from CD to Chase and from Pollard to Bijan.
The one thing I'm going to throw out, all 3 of these guys, Bo Nix, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, have bye weeks coming up. Week 12 for Jamar Chase and Bijan Robinson, week 14 for Bo Nix. I need to know your record. Daniel, this is a big choice here. I'm also making this trade, but can you survive an almost certain week 12 loss? Because he's also Texans heavy. Texans have a week 12 as well, right? No, they already had their bye.
I mean, that's not gonna
sway you.
Yeah, it doesn't really sway me much. I mean, at the end of the day, fantasy's still a week-to-week game.
That's true.
You're losing. You're gaining an open roster spot, so even making this trade, you can rush to get Bo Nix without dropping anybody, right?
Yeah, the most honestly, I'm only doing this trade
somebody from the end of your roster and get Matthew Stafford for that week 14 bye.
There you go, and drop both. And yeah, he does have Jalen Waddle at the end of his roster,
who had a better week 10, but still wasn't anything to shake a stick at.
Yep. Bringing in Jamar Chase makes Waddle expendable. It probably makes Jacoby Myers expendable, though I'm not in a rush to do that. But I agree with Josh. Do the trade. Go get Bo Nix and Matt Stafford. And I love it.
Best comment right there. 2-0 since becoming a subscriber. Hell yeah.
Make this trade, Daniel. At 6 wins, you're going to win week 11 with this trade. You're going to win week 13 for this trade. That puts you at 8 wins, and it probably puts you in the playoffs. And then you're a fucking juggernaut in the playoffs. And week 14 is going to be in great shape for you too. You're likely taking the L week 12, but who knows? Your opponent could have absolute ass schedule.
Could also be dealing with a lot of week 12 buys, correct?
Yeah. So no, make the trade. Make the trade pretty quickly there, my friend. Josh, we got Alex Flores. Should we trade George Pickens and Josh Jacobs for Jay Jettis? I love these types of trades.
I do, yeah.
But Josh, you know damn well I'm back.
You don't trade running backs.
Well, it's 2 problems here, Josh. I don't trade running backs, and I'm back uncomfortably in my pants for George Pickens with Russell Simmons right now. I'm not making this trade. I'm sorry.
It's gray sweatpants season, and you're tightening them, aren't you?
Yeah, can't do it. Pickens looks so good with Russell Wilson. It is ridiculous. I love Jettis. Do not get me wrong. If there's any dynasty or keeper aspect to this lead, I make this trade without hesitation. In redraft, I'm hanging on to the running back, Josh.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is I want to know what the state of your running backs are, because Josh Jacobs is a fringe RB1 that you probably drafted as an RB2. So, unless the RB1 that you drafted, maybe it's Christian McCaffrey, maybe it's Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
Like if it's one of those guys where I'm maybe on edge a little bit, I'm probably hanging on to Josh Jacobs. Pickens, for obviously that favors Justin Jefferson. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah.
The only thing that I worry with Pickens, it's volume.
Oh, 100%.
The yards are there. The touchdowns are starting to creep up, and he's had a couple that were essentially called back. One, due to penalty. One with, not being able to get the second foot down. But again, the things that George Pickens does really well as a wide receiver, Russ is catering to those strengths. So I think without knowing the full scope of your roster, I'm keeping Pickens and Jacobs.
1 game over 10 targets for Pickens this season, and it's while Justin Fields was the quarterback, not Russell.
Yeah, and Justin Jefferson probably has like 2 under 10 targets.
Yeah, I was going to say all of them above. Last question before we move on a little bit, Josh. Rest of season, Brian Thomas Jr. or Calvin Ridley? Let's start with that one. So BTJ or Calvin Ridley, 2 guys heading in very different directions in fantasy football right now.
I want to wait and hear the final news on Trevor Lawrence, because I've heard a lot of mixed reactions on that.
Yeah.
But Brian Thomas Jr. is not healthy either. I think it's like over the last 3 weeks, he's only averaging like 3 targets a game. Like, it's pretty bad. I think you have to go Calvin Ridley, truthfully, just because there's so many unknowns with Brian Thomas Jr. I was very worried about Will Levis coming in and really kind of disrupting a lot of that chemistry that Ridley and Mason Rudolph had developed, but Calvin really hit the ground running, and it was just like, just put it in my direction, I'm going to catch it. And that's exactly what he's been doing. I think it's like 3 straight games over 20 fantasy points or something.
2 touchdowns last week again.
Yeah. So I think you have to go Calvin Ridley.
It's Ridley for me. And then Josh, this one I can't answer. This is Sophie's choice for the tight end guy. K. Dotton or TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson, obviously great week 10 after a slow week 9 in his first game back. K. Dotton has been red hot, but on bye this week. I don't know if that can play into this decision at all.
Yeah, it's Hawkinson for me.
It
He's been a key cog in this Minnesota offense, and now like he's kind of regained that number 2 target role. It does not matter to me who is the quarterback in Minnesota. It's going to be Hawkinson. I think the biggest thing with Cade Otton, you have to take into account the expected dip that's going to happen in his production once Mike Evans comes back. Because right now, Rachaad White is basically the number 2 target in this offense behind Cade Otton without Godwin and Evans. When you bring in Evans back into the fold, does that knock Otton down to 3 and Rachaad White keeps his pass catching role? Or does Rachaad White take a down tick? I would be more willing to bet that it's Otton that takes the bigger step back versus Rachaad White, because I still can't figure out. This team fucking loves Rachaad White.
Yes, they do. That might come up in the next segment. Seeing a ton of live views. We appreciate you guys. Happy you're spending
a lot of them are on Twitter. Hit the link and come over to YouTube.
So Josh stealing my bit here. If you're on Twitter, Josh is kind enough to include a link over to our YouTube page. At the very least, if you're enjoying the information, click that link, go over, hit the subscribe button. We recently crossed like 1,200 followers, maybe 1,300.
Dude, we're over 1,320 now.
I love it. We're trying to grow. We're trying to make a little money so we can pay our writers money for all the great content you guys are getting from Club Fantasy. So hit that like, hit the subscribe, do all the things that you guys need to do to make us successful in this space. Josh, before we get where we're going, we have to look at where we've been. What did we learn in week 10? We like to give a shout out. That was not supposed to rhyme. Don't know how I pulled that off. We want to give a shout out to JJ Zacharison's data thread, Dwayne McFarland's utilization report, and Ryan Heath from over on Fantasy Points for the stats recap. We like to look at these things when we see kind of what the minutia of week 10 was. Josh, what did you pick up from week 10?
The Bengals defense is going to cost this team a playoff spot. That defense is so fucking bad. And their offense with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, they're absolutely cooking. I don't know what Lou Anarumo did that sapped everything, but the only team that they seemingly are good against is the Chiefs, and that's it. Yeah. It is so bad right now. Like, they're wasting these prime years of Chase and Burrow because they can't stop a nosebleed, and it's baffling to me.
And it doesn't help that they had to keep putting so much money into that offensive line that it's kind of taken away the money that they were ever able to put in defense. When you look at the free agent acquisitions, the Bengals have never really made a free agent splash. They've done well in the draft, but these guys are still young and growing. All their free agent acquisitions end up having to be on a fucking offensive line. And in a way,
and they don't know how to scout offensive linemen. And let's be real here. The offensive linemen that hit free agency, they're not usually that good. That's why they're free agents. There's
a reason they're free agents. Yeah, that's a good point. Josh, my first point, confirmation bias is a bitch. And I thought done a good job of blocking confirmation bias, but I fell into 2 traps over the last month. And they're about teams that we talked about yesterday. Caleb Williams and the Bears, Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. I wanted Caleb Williams to be good so bad. And we talked about this. He had that great game before the bye week. And I was like, this is it. This kid's going to blow up. And he comes out of the bye week and this offense is trash. I'm not going to say he can't turn it around. He certainly can. But what I do want to tell you guys is if something is trending that it's terrible and one good game happens just because you like the player, don't all of a sudden think they're good. I don't even like Aaron Rodgers. I just wanted Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams to be good. So when I saw one good game from the Jets, I was like, this is it. All season, Josh, I've been telling people Aaron Rodgers is the problem with this offense, and that was never more evident than this past week. So we have to be careful with this confirmation bias, folks. If you recognize it, you can probably stop yourself from making mistakes like giving way too much to get Caleb Williams on a contending team and essentially ruining your season because he ain't it in redraft.
Yeah, I mean, one data point is exactly that. It's 1. 2 is a coincidence. 3 is a trend. That's what it boils down to. So when you see these big games, like, it's easy to get hyped, but don't fall into the trap. It's okay to tread lightly and be cautious before going all in.
Yeah. If I had played Geno Smith in 2 of the weeks where I played Caleb Williams, Geno Smith is who I cut to bring Caleb Williams in. I would have won 2 games that I didn't win, and I'd be talking much happier about the playoffs right now. Talk about teams with quarterback problems, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been sandbagging Anthony Richardson on Club Fantasy for how many years now? It feels like 2.5, 2, whatever. Look, if Joe Flacco apparently gives this team the best chance to win, I haven't seen it yet. So really what you're doing is you're just costing Anthony Richardson valuable snaps and development time. Like, he's not going to learn anything on the bench but you've got to be able to get film on this kid because he's only played 17 games. If that. I don't even think he's played 17, truthfully. Because he played 4 last year, and then they benched him in.
Yeah, he's played 8 games.
8 games?
So
he's played 12 games in the NFL. And he's missed a lot of time
preseason. I was like, wait, what? But yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, like he's only played that many games in the NFL. He's got to be able to develop rapport with his receivers. Would it suck for fantasy purposes for all, those of us that roster, Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman when he's healthy, or Josh Downs? 1,000% it would. But if you're the Colts, you spent a 4th overall pick on this kid because you saw something. You're not coaching for your job at this point. Like, look at what Dave Canales and the Panthers ultimately did with Bryce Young. They saw an opportunity to get Bryce Young back into the saddle after sitting for a couple of weeks, or basically a month after they, demoted him or whatever. And he's looked better. I mean, the stats aren't eye-popping by any means, but he's looked better. He's processing better, right? This is ultimately where we need to lead Anthony Richardson into. Like, it just needs to be a timeout, right? It doesn't need to be Joe Flacco gives us the best chance to win, because he doesn't. He's a 40-fucking-year-old quarterback.
I'm going to throw Tyler up on the screen. Would we start a quarterback that quit mid-game? He was tired.
Look, I'm with you. I didn't love that by any means. Use that as a teaching tool.
Exactly, and not a complete benching tool. I don't think he quit. I got really mad about what DJ Moore did a few weeks ago. That was quitting.
But he limped off with an ankle injury. That was different.
I don't know.
I mean, you literally see him limp off.
He seemed okay when he was walking towards the bench. He did limp off the field. I'll give you that. I don't know. Maybe I need to watch both plays again. But the Anthony Richardson thing, at this point, a teaching moment. A 1-game benching, a 1-half benching. But benching for Joe Flacco and shooting your offense in the foot, I don't think that's the right way to go. I'm going to agree with Josh on this one. Give the kid time. Obviously, Josh, I'm a big Bryce Young guy. I'm a big give the kid time guy. They got to do something.
I mean, just even when you look at the number of starts that he's had so far this year, and or not even this year, but just, through the first 2 years of his career, and you compare it to another really raw prospect, and by no means am I putting them in the same conversation, because I think one's going to be the same, but Josh Allen was very similar. Josh Allen couldn't hit the broadside of a barn standing 3 feet in front of it. But they said, we're going to grow as Josh Allen grows. We're going to go through these growing pains. Anthony Richardson needs to go through these growing pains.
Tyler, Zach Wilson's never been tired in his life. I don't think he's ever bad. Yeah, exactly. Don't give me a hard time here, Tyler. We're not comparing it. First of all, don't make me defend Anthony Richardson.
I know, right? Look, I don't like talking positive things about Anthony Richardson. Yeah. We've been sandbagging him for years.
Yeah. Josh, I touched on this yesterday. It's Bear saying again on the Tuesday show, John Mechie has potential in this league. What I liked yesterday or from him on Sunday was we finally saw that speed. We've seen this guy score a lot of touchdowns in college, a lot of long touchdowns in college. Yesterday or Sunday, 5 catches, 74 yards, a 25-yard long pass, and 14.8 yards per catch. To this point in his career, he had never really had an opportunity to show that in his truncated second year, because his rookie year obviously was lost to cancer, 9.9 yards per catch. This season, he's only really played 3 games, had never crossed 10 yards per catch until Sunday. I think there's hope for John Mechie, and we talked about this. I'm not sure if it's with the Texans, but Diggs is only on a 1-year deal. If they like what they're seeing from Mechie, this opens things up for John Mechie in the future.
Yeah, I was doing some digging, and I figure I guess we can talk about it now versus wait until the wide.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's in the wide receiver section. What's funny, Josh, is I forgot to put him there, but then when he was one of my points, I was like, I guess I should go add him.
Yeah, you're good. No, I mean, over the last 2 games, he's played 51% of his snaps out of the slot, which, again, that's kind of where we sort of envision John Mechie playing in this league. The problem is that, from a from a slight and build standpoint, Tank Dell always fit that mold better just because he's only 165 pounds. Mechie can kind of slide back and forth between the two, but it's very much a he's taking that Stephon Diggs role. And that's kind of where they put Diggs was, kind of going, inside out, in the 3 receiver sets, they'd put him inside. And that's where John Mechie is playing right now. He had 19% of the target share in week 10. So, again, an uptick from week 9, which is great. Hopefully that continues, especially once the Texans get Nico Collins back. Yeah. That should open things up more so for the offense.
I love how Nico Collins coming back is the nail in the coffin for Tank Dell for us. But in my, I don't know, confirmation bias, I'm like, hey, John Mechie's going to fucking eat, baby. But very different roles there. All right, Josh. And you kind of already touched on this one based on the trade questions, but your final thing you learned in week 10.
I gotta go back up to my points. Shit. Okay.
Yeah.
RIP fantasy CD Lamb. Again, we talked about it. This quarterback situation is so bad in Dallas. And not having a running game, it's only going to make matters worse on this offense. How you score 8 fantasy points with a 30+% target share is mind-boggling to me. Yeah. I understand, like, confirmation bias is a bitch and all this. Like, this isn't something that I want to get on board with, but these are the tea leaves, plain and simple.
Oh, no,
he is the only option on an offense that A, is bad, and B, has an even worse quarterback position.
Yeah, I feel like we were saying CeeDee Lamb could have survived, so I wouldn't even call this confirmation bias. This is unfortunately whatever the opposite of that is. This is just a devastating loss for the fantasy community right now.
Right.
Yeah, and then, Josh, I know you agree with my final point. It's one we talked about yesterday, but I felt, again, it bared talking again, and you actually already touched on it. The Buccaneers have no idea how to handle their running backs. 10 carries for Rachaad White when he's averaging sub 4 yards a carry. They don't give Sean Tucker the ball at all, Josh. My man is averaging 7 yards a carry this season, and they will not give him the ball. Our solution yesterday was keep Rachaad White in for passing downs if you love him that fucking much. And he's been great as a receiver, 291 yards, 4 touchdowns. But you need to be splitting these carries evenly between Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker. Bucky Irving, 5.6 yards per carry, if I remember correctly. Sean Tucker, as I mentioned, 7.2. Came in and feasted for a game, and they just won't give him the ball. At the very least, if I see Rachaad White in double-digit carries, fire the offensive coordinator.
3.1 yards per carry on 10 carries.
Yeah.
Rachaad White is not a good runner of the football, plain and simple.
It just bothers me so much. And maybe it's, again, wearing the Syracuse shirt. I just want to see Sean Tucker play more. Let's get my guy out there. I want to see more Sean Tucker, plain and simple. All right, guys, we're going to start getting into the waivers here in just a moment, but you guys have inundated us with questions during that break. So let's get to some questions going all the way back to Charlene in trouble this week. James Conner on bye has Khalil Herbert on the bench. Estimate Zamir White. It's never Zamir White. Jerome Ford, Cam Akers, and are at the top of the waiver wire. Josh, when I was making the list, Jerome Ford was a tough ad for me. I don't know that I'm prioritizing Ford, but Estimate and Akers, Estimate seems to be the top of that list based on volume. I think you have to go out and get those guys even over Khalil Herbert. I do not trust Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, I don't trust Herbert at all. He wasn't technically covered for or considered for a carry, which allowed Chase Brown to have 100% of the running back share because Khalil Herbert fumbled the carry or the snap exchange or whatever. I would go Estimate, Ford as a deep dart throw. Akers to me is still just a handcuff, and it's never Zamir White.
When I was looking up the stats on Jerome Ford, he had a terrible game before the Browns bye. He did lead the Browns in snap count, Josh. So there is a positive indicator, but it just hasn't led to much volume, and who knows.
And he's still the passing down back in that team. So
exactly. Jeff Rogers, new name, I believe, has Josh Allen on the bye week for week 12. So next week, should he pick up Matthew Stafford or Justin Herbert? Josh, I already have the schedules up for you because I know you're going to ask. Matthew Stafford is at home against Philadelphia, and Justin Herbert is at home against the Baltimore Ravens, who have been just bleeding points.
Yeah, it's Justin Herbert for me pretty easily. That Philly defense, and not trying to sound biased or anything, but their pass defense has been pretty fucking good lately. So
I love how our shows. I love how our shows get themes without even meaning to get themes, and today's theme is bias, kids. All right. Tyler Speary has a couple of waiver questions for us. He said he's done picking on us at this point about Anthony Richardson. So who's the tight end to target between Jake Ferguson, Dalton Schultz, and Knox? Who am I missing on Cam T? What am I?
Komet.
Oh, Komet. I was like, okay, I'm not putting together who that is. I talked to Josh before the show. Dawson Knox is very interesting to me if Dalton Kincaid is out. And I just don't know that I can blow waiver priority without knowing what's going on with that, Josh. I'm probably still going to lean Ferguson. The waivers are the volumes there. Schultz could make another argument. I guess they're kind of the same guy right now.
Yeah, that's kind of where I would put it. Ferguson, again, young quarterbacks are going to kind of lean on those safe underneath routes, and that's sort of where Ferguson is living these days. Dalton Schultz, look, if John Mechie continues to shine, I don't think Schultz is really going to get too much run, and especially with Nico coming back, Nico's going to be that 25 to 28% target earner in this offense. I'm with you on Knox. Like, if Dalton Kincaid's out, Knox is 100% the guy that I want. But again, I'm not blowing that waiver priority on that without knowing full force. And then Komet, I'm not riding that train, but I've been off that train for 4 years now. So.
Yeah. All of Tyler's questions play in. So I'm going to go to this one. So what are our thoughts on Otten when Evans back? Is Ferguson droppable?
For Otten, yeah.
If Otten is your other option, Ferguson is 100% droppable. Obviously, you have to get through this week 11 bye. But I think Otten could actually get better, Josh, when Evans is back. I think Otten is probably
going to take less attention from him.
One extra player that he's not going to see when Mike Evans is back right now. That's my thought too. So
correct. Yeah.
Especially with the Buccaneers' open willingness to not throw to wide receivers right now. It's just absolutely nuts.
Don't worry. It'll change when Mike Evans comes back. People.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then he follows up, Josh, and you had just touched on this. Is Dell droppable when Nico comes back? And I think, Josh, Dell was on my list. No, I decided not to put him on the list this week because he's been moderately decent for 2 of the last 3 weeks. Once Nico's back, I told you this otherwise, Josh, I called Nico my cell yesterday. I don't trust CJ Stroud. So I would say Dell is droppable. You talked about when are you going to trust starting Adonai Mitchell? I'm not going to trust starting Tank Dell.
Yeah, I mean, with Diggs and Collins, Dell was not even rosterable, truthfully. That's how bad he's been. Dell, even without Nico, has had a couple of okay games. It hasn't been anything that resembled anything close to what he did last year as a rookie. But again, I think a lot of that is a CJ Stroud problem. It's an offensive line problem. They just don't have the time to find him. I would give it a week or two before I just immediately drop him. But my whole thought process when I'm considering waivers, am I ever going to feel comfortable starting this player?
Yeah.
Right. So if there's somebody on waivers that you're like, all right, if I needed to put them in the flex, I feel comfortable starting them, then 100% make the move to drop Dell.
Couldn't have said better. Our buddy George gets to the show early this time to get his questions in. Should we start the Eagles defense or pick up the Rams versus New England this week? I don't have I'm getting to my rankings right now. I think I have the Eagles actually relatively highly rated, even against a Washington team. They've done well enough. Yeah, I have the Eagles at 11. I have the Rams at 15. Now, I haven't done my deepest dive yet, but I'm probably good with hanging on to the Eagles here, Josh.
Yeah, I'd be okay with it. Eagles have played really well. I mean, it's Thursday night. Anything can happen Thursday. I like the upside with the Rams defense.
Yeah, I was going to say the Rams are bad.
They kept Miami in check. Jared Verse has been phenomenal on that defensive line for them. And again, you're dealing with a young quarterback in Drake May. There's definitely some things that could go wrong in this. I think they're in New England this week, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they're in New England. Yeah. So I definitely don't love the cross-country side of things, but I don't know. I'll cede to you, Ryan, on this one, because you do a much deeper dive when it comes to defenses. But
George, what I'll
I think
tell
overall,
you
the Eagles defense is better. But when you're talking fantasy, I don't play a ton of leagues with defenses, truthfully.
Yeah. So right now, my initial run, Josh, typically the better defense wins in my initial run. Mm-hmm. George, I do my first deep dive on defense going into tomorrow's show. Well, yeah, to go into tomorrow's show to get ready for the stream of the week segment. So what I'll tell you is right now it's the Eagles. Follow up with me this week, but I don't think you need to blow a waiver priority on getting the Rams. They're going to probably make the list for stream of the week, but they're not one that I'm like itching to go after. Tyler's asking what tight end should we pick up? Tyler, I assume that's just going back to your last question. I think we both agreed from that group, it's Ferguson or Knox, but Knox, we want to know more about Dalton Kincaid. So Ferguson, I guess, for week 11, but Knox would be the better play if we knew Kincaid was out, plain and simple.
Yeah, and we'll have more tight end options once we get to the tight end section of the waiver.
Yeah, exactly. So from that group, it's that. George has a trade question. Are we trading? Why am I blanking? Kenneth Walker. I was like, why am I blanking on Walker? I'm thinking Javon Walker. God, I'm old. Kenneth Walker and Devontae Adams for Bijan Robinson. I'm not against it. The only issue is Walker's had his bye and Bijan hasn't.
I mean, Bijan's the RB3 on the season. He's balling. So
yeah, if you can survive week 12.
If you feel the need to offload Adams, like I'm fine with it.
George has been trying to offload Adams for 3 weeks now. He does feel that need.
Well, there you go. There's your answer. Offload Adams. Go get Bijan.
Yeah, as long as you can survive week 12. Daniel comes back to his Lamar question. Josh, the manager wants Mixon instead of Pollard. So now we are talking Mixon to Bijan. I forget who the wide receiver is now, but it was upgraded to Jamar Chase. But he's giving up Lamar to Bo Nix. So Lamb to Chase, obviously big win to Lamb. Mixon to Bijan, the win just got a little bit smaller than Tony Pollard. And then obviously Nix to Lamar is a big loss at quarterback. Are you still making that trade if you have to give up Mixon instead of Tony Pollard to get Bijan Robinson and Jamar Chase?
No.
I'm not either.
I mean, Mixon's actually outproduced Bijan Robinson on a per game basis this year.
It kills the benefit you're losing when the Lamar Jackson thing is what it does.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's not worth it in the sense of, yes, you're gaining a lot from Lamb to Chase, but you're basically then still downgrading from Lamar to Bo Nix, and that gap kind of in a way sort of offsets.
Yep.
Whereas you're actually losing on the running back front.
Yep. I say I don't know that you're losing. Mixon to Bijan.
I basically would counter, if you want to upgrade your quarterback position, you're going to upgrade my other positions, plain and simple, because I have no other quarterback, so I'm losing on this.
Every quarterback outside of the top 15 is droppable. He wasn't even rostered enough to make my droppable list at all. So, yeah, there's that. All right, guys, let's get into the actual waivers here. We call it Morse code. This is how you're going to get the leg up on your league. We like to remind everybody, bye weeks, Giants, Buccaneers, Cardinals, and Panthers. I made a conscious effort. I did not include any of these guys on the list. Josh added one. So when we talk about that guy, take note, because Josh thinks he's worth adding during the bye week. Most of these guys, the ones who are available in 50% of leagues, I'm not making a concerted effort to add them during the bye week. So the top quarterbacks, we always go by position. Justin Herbert, obviously, in the article. Russell Wilson out there in 60% of leagues. Bo Nix in 50% of leagues. Geno Smith in 50. Drake May in 90. I want to draw attention to Nix and Drake May, who both have week 14 buys. If you're doing this, you're probably playing the streaming game anyway, though. Josh, I believe Bo Nix is probably a little bit more than a streaming quarterback at this point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's a low-end QB1 on the season. Hit 2 more touchdown passes against a really good Chiefs defense. This Broncos offense is starting to find some rhythm here. I mean, they're young, so they're not going to finish every drive, and we've kind of seen that, especially against the good, Chiefs defense. But there's a lot of value in what Bo Nix brings with his legs. I think he's 3rd or 4th among quarterbacks in rushing output this season. Let me just verify that. 5th in rushing yards among quarterbacks, and he has 4 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for 3rd among quarterbacks. Those are the types of things that you want from a fantasy quarterback, that especially when you don't have the Lamar Jacksons, the Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, etc.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, and it looks like you wanted to add on to some of the facts that Britt added in her article for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's QB6 over the last 3 weeks. We saw the return of Gus Edwards to that running back rotation in week 10 coming off of IR. And this was actually the 2nd most rushing attempts that they've had in a game, or it's the most rushing attempts they've had in a game since week 2, where they had 44 rush attempts. So they kind of, flipped the script a little bit, got back to that sort of ground and pound. I think a lot of that more so was game script, because the Titans offense is just that bad and they can do what they needed to do. but Justin Herbert's still hyper efficient. 66% completion percentage, 11 touchdowns to 1 interception on the season. He is producing and he's finding his weapons. I mean, he still threw a touchdown pass to Quentin Johnston this week, ran in another touchdown. And that was kind of the thing with Justin Herbert that we were talking about this season, is that there was going to be more opportunities for him as a runner in this offense. And he's always had sneaky good athletic ability, and he's being smart with the football. So all that's going to add up to, at minimum, a low-end QB1 production, which if you'd listened to me in the preseason, you'd already have him on your rosters anyway for that exact reason.
Yeah. Two guys I'll just throw quick notes on before we move on to running backs is Russell Wilson. Very winnable matchup against Baltimore this week. I'll be interested to see if he's able to get close to what Joe Burrow just did. Wilson is coming off of a 3-touchdown game, but did it in under 200 yards. So you kind of don't love that. But if you do love yards, Geno Smith still leads the NFL in yards per game right now as a quarterback, which is fucking incredible to me that's what's going on with this Seattle offense. Josh, let's move on to these running backs. In the article, Britt covers Trey Benson and Audric Estime. Those are going to be the big ones people are asking about. I will point out Trey Benson is on bye this week. Audric Estime does have that week 14 bye. The ones I added to the list: Jerome Ford out there in about 60% of leagues. Tyjae Spears out there in about 50% of leagues. Tyler Algier out there in 50%. He seems like he's always on this list, as is Ray Davis. Both do have week 12 buys. Gus Edwards, good game back, 80% available. And Cam Akers, Josh, 80% available. If you guys are looking for more content on Benson and Estime, check out Britt's article. But Josh, you want to talk a little bit about Tyjae Spears?
Yeah. So, they talked a lot about, in the beginning of the season, him and Tony Pollard having more of a split. Tony Pollard did get a little banged up in this game and ended up leaving. I think it was 5 of Spears' 7 carries came during that absence from Pollard. But again, the splits are there. I'm not saying that he's going to be like a reliable flex option, because we've seen the healthy games with Tony Pollard and Spears still becomes an afterthought because Tony Pollard has been that good. This actually was only the 3rd game that Pollard has played this season where he scored fewer than 14 fantasy points. So
it's also Spears' first healthy game back in a while too. So you wonder if
he's missed about a month too.
Yeah.
So kind of slowly easing his way into it. But with the season kind of going the way that it has for Tennessee, they're doing some information diving, right? Like they went out and they signed Pollard to a 3-year deal. They know exactly what they're getting with him.
Yes.
They need to see more Tyjae Spears, because they need to know, can this kid be a reliable second option in tandem with with Pollard? Or do we need to consider, more of a Thunder type back to complement the more lightning style of Tony Pollard, right? Or can we just run Tony Pollard out there for 250 carries and it just works for us? Like there needs to be a lot of information gathering. I don't know that I'm going to go blow a waiver priority on Tyjae Spears, because again, even in the limited action that we've seen from him, it hasn't been anything impressive. But again, this is handcuff season. If Tony Pollard were to miss time, you're going to see a lot more Tyjae Spears. So you need this guy on your team.
We do way too many shows together, because I literally, if you did not make the point, was going to be like, at the very least, if I'm the Pollard manager, I'm not going to leave him sit on waivers. And Josh, speaking of running backs who have missed a month, the Gus Bus is back on the field this week, 80% available right now.
Yeah, he was the more efficient runner of the two
between
him and J.K. Dobbins. But, only 30% rush share in comparison to Dobbins' 55.5%. Dobbins still the more dominant guy in the passing game. Dobbins is still the guy you want. Backup running backs are typically more efficient. But you know what? This is the story of Gus Edwards' career. Even when he was a lead back, he was over 5 yards a carry. So he's just that good. And really, I've been talking about this all freaking season when it comes to Dobbins. These Achilles injuries that he's coming back from, we've seen it happen with running backs throughout time. They start out the big burst, and then things slowly start to come back to earth. J.K. Dobbins less than 4 yards a carry yesterday again. So this isn't something that should be new. If Hassan Haskins doesn't come in and take that touchdown, and that touchdown goes to Gus Edwards, this is probably a different conversation, and Gus Edwards is higher up on your waiver priority. So this is the kind of time where, let me get in on the ground floor on this. Gus Edwards maybe sneaks through waivers because I think he only had like 5.5 fantasy points. Like it wasn't anything like groundbreaking by any means. But again, he's an RB2 on an offense that is not shy about running the football. And when J.K. Dobbins isn't being very efficient, what's going to happen? Those roles will slowly start to reverse. You'll start to see more Gus Edwards carries. And Dobbins now becomes that low-end RB2 when you thought you may have had an RB1 rest of the season.
And I don't care what happened this week. Edwards is eventually going to take in that 5-yard role. Like that's who he is as a person. That's why they signed him. All right, let's knock out some questions, Josh. Craig Lennox says this is a good idea to drop Davante Adams for A.J. Brown as quickly as possible for however much fab it takes. Someone called you out in the chat. What kind of league is that? It is wild. No offense, Craig, that A.J. Brown is out there. Get him.
I mean, it could very well be a guillotine league.
Oh, I never even thought about that. That's
it could be a guillotine league. It could be a 6 or 8 person league. I mean,
someone made a mistake. Benefit. Plain and simple. So.
But also too, like, we see this all the time in fantasy leagues, like especially if there's not like a don't drop list with your leagues.
People
there are some platforms that have that. It could have been rage drop. I mean, AJ Brown missed 3 games early in the season. Hasn't caught a touchdown, I don't think, in 3 weeks because Jalen Hurts has just decided to keep all of them for himself.
Yeah.
So, there's some frustration there, but again, like he's still the guy that's earning 28 to 30% of the target share. So go get AJ Brown because while Davante Adams' targets are very up there, AJ Brown's in a much better offense.
Yep. And then another Davante Adams question, popular guy today. And this is a tough question for me, Josh. Would we rather have Adams or Ridley? We obviously spent the entire early part of the show talking Ridley up, and I'm trying not to let the confirmation bias that Adams is a better player weigh me the wrong way here, but I think I still want Adams, Josh, at least in full PPR, but I don't know. Ridley's seeing the volume too.
Yeah. I think I still would lean Adams. It's not by much.
It's not
by much, but I mean, the cross argument to this is Adams has to deal with Garrett Wilson and his target share, whereas now
Ridley
has
nobody.
Yeah, so I think if you're looking more for a target hog, go get Calvin Ridley. Like I'm perfectly fine with that. I still would lean Davante Adams, but again, it's close enough to me where if you make the counter argument for or against one or the other, I'll agree with you.
If you have a feeling about someone, do it. Yeah. Me and Josh have a feeling about Davante Adams. If you have a feeling the other way, do it. Tyler, just to button this up, we prefer Knox if we knew Kincaid was out, plain and simple.
Yep.
If you have to make a choice today, it's Ferguson because we don't know enough about Kincaid.
Yep.
Michael's getting offered Darnell Mooney for T. Higgins. Is he missing something?
You're missing the name value, and keep Mooney because you don't want to deal with T. Higgins and his business decision mentality right now.
Yeah, Mooney is balling. T. Higgins isn't playing. You want the Darnell Mooney side of this trade. If I'm giving up Mooney for Higgins, I want something else back, and that is not something I thought I'd be saying.
But again, somebody is offering him Darnell Mooney for his T. Higgins.
Yeah,
that's how this question reads. So
that's what I'm saying. Is
that's the case? Go get Darnell Mooney. Take it and run Mooney.
With it. Absolutely. Yeah. I think you're in good shape taking that. And then George says his final question is he flexing Chase Brown or Adams this week if he can't make that trade? I'm not benching Chase Brown, plain and simple.
Yeah, there's no way you're benching Chase Brown.
Yeah, and Michael points out he does have T. Sorry, Josh, but keep going talking about Chase Brown.
Go get Darnell Mooney. Yeah, no, I mean Chase Brown's seeing all the carries. Plain and simple. He's getting the RB1 usage that we hoped that he would get. This Bengals, there's nothing wrong with the Bengals offense. It's performing great. It's the defense that sucks.
Yeah. Craig did point out, and I was going to say this, Josh, maybe it's a standard league. You mentioned that old boy hasn't been catching touchdowns, hasn't caught a touchdown in a month. I'm guessing that was a rage drop in a standard league where they just didn't think they were getting what they needed out of Davante Adams. Well, to the receivers who are out there in far more leagues, certainly not AJ Brown. These are the guys available in about 50% of leagues that we think are worth an eye. We may call one of them a trap. I know we're calling one of them a trap. From Britt's article, you can get insight on Quentin Johnston, Adonai Mitchell, and Devon Vele. I will point out Mitchell and Vele both have week 14 buys. The guys that I thought needed added to the list, Ricky Pearsall's out there in 75% of leagues. Rashad Bateman has held on to his role 85% of leagues. Jalen Tolbert, 80% of leagues. If you think CeeDee Lamb could miss time, who knows what's going on there. DeMarcus Robinson, 75%. Jerry Jeudy, 50%. Some fucking how Cedric Tillman is out there in 50% of leagues. Fix that quickly. Noah Brown out there in 90% of leagues. Demario Douglas, 70. Josh Palmer, 90. John Mechie, 99%. MVS is a trap. He is out there 99% of leagues for a reason. He is also the number one waiver priority list on Sleeper right now, Josh, which is why I decided to add him. And then you wanted to add, and I'm just going to let you get started with this guy because he is on bye this week. But you think there's maybe some smoke or some fire where there's smoke with Jalen Coker.
Yeah, Jalen Coker with the Panthers. He had a big breakout. I think it was the first week that Devontae Adams had the hamstring, or Deontay Johnson had the hamstring issue before he got traded. And my initial thought was, well, Deontay's going to come back, so that's fine, whatever. Then, of course, Deontay gets traded, and it's like, all right, well, does he sort of take this role? How's this going to play out? You know, they drafted Xavier Legette high. Coker's an undrafted free agent, et cetera, et cetera. They're starting a lot of rookies on this Panthers offense. I mean, they're Jatavian Sanders at tight end, Legette at wide receiver, Coker at wide receiver. We know how young Bryce Young is. They're going to start working Jonathan Brooks into this system. So this is going to be a very young offense, and these kids are going to have a lot of opportunity to sort of see some opportunity, right? Bryce Young isn't doing much at all when it comes to actual passing work, right? 125 yards, I think, against the Giants. Wasn't anything great. But when you look at what the Panthers wide receivers have done over the past couple of weeks, of these two guys, Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette, Coker has more 50-plus yard games the last 3 weeks, and he has a slightly higher target share than Xavier Legette.
I think
Legette, go ahead.
I think he got banged up on that hurdle in week 8 as well, to where I think coming out of the bye, we could see a little bit better, week 9 rather, but regardless, I think we could see a little bit better Legette coming out of the bye, but that's not diminishing what you did from Coker. Coker is taking advantage of the opportunity presented.
Yeah, Coker is kind of becoming more of that volume play, whereas Legette is more of the touchdown producer. And I think that's kind of what's propping up that fantasy value, obviously, with the touchdowns. But all that to say, don't sleep on Jalen Coker. Like, he's probably going to pass through waivers because the Panthers are on bye. Most people probably aren't going to be considering him because he didn't put up any stats in week 11 as a result. Yeah. You might have yourself a free waiver claim in week 12.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely fair. Josh, let's go back up to the top of the list, and I'll point out for the 100th time in the last 2 weeks, Ricky Pearsall was shot in the chest 2 months ago. Just went for 73 yards in his first NFL touchdown. However, there's a little bit of water to be poured here as well.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it water, but last week, Joe Zolo and I, we kind of went back and forth on this. He's very much on the Ricky Pearsall train. I'm very much on the Juwan Jennings train. Pearsall did outscore Jennings this week by 1 literal point. Pearsall did catch the touchdown. But when you look at what Jennings did, Jennings had a 32% target share. Whew. Brock Purdy is looking his way. He is basically the number 2 option in this offense now.
He's what we all wanted Brandon Ayuk to be.
Basically, yeah. There's a connection there. That's why they prioritized bringing Juwan Jennings back. He's been able to kind of step into that role. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Ricky Pearsall's not going to have a role in this offense. He's going to. They want to use him. They spend a first-round pick on him for a reason. The point that I'm ultimately trying to get at is, without that touchdown, this was Juwan Jennings through and through. And I don't like banking on touchdowns. I want to see, how are you involved in this offense? Are you producing with the target shares that you're earning, the routes that you're running, etc.? Because in PPR scoring, you can get by without touchdowns because of receiving volume.
Yeah.
And that's what Juwan Jennings is getting right now. And we've seen the upside with Juwan Jennings. Dude put up a 40-point performance earlier this year. I haven't seen that with Ricky Pearsall yet, right? So, again, there's going to be opportunity for Ricky Pearsall.
Yeah.
I am just not 100% sold with CMC getting back into the fold. This was an uncharacteristically low George Kittle week. Debo was kind of the apple of the defense's eye, so they tried to take him out of this game, which led a lot of open looks for Juwan Jennings, for Ricky Pearsall. So it's just, to me, he's the guy that is further down that pecking order than Juwan Jennings. So just beware of that when you're considering how much fab to blow on Ricky Pearsall.
Speaking of pecking order, Josh, there was a lot of noise out of Baltimore when they brought in Deontay Johnson that the pecking order wasn't going to change and this was going to stay Rashad Bateman's role. And that's what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Mark Andrews take a big bump this week, and that coincided with Isaiah Likely being out, right?
Yeah.
Deontay Johnson ran all of 3 routes this week and was targeted on 2 of them. He is not a part of this offense.
Amazing utilization, 66%.
Yeah, love that. Don't get me wrong. But they want to use Bateman. That's why they signed him to that 3-year extension. That's why they drafted Zay Flowers. They want to use him. Zay Flowers is a dog, straight up.
Yeah.
That kid's a human joystick. I love watching him play football.
Yeah.
They don't want to disrupt this chemistry. Deontay Johnson's job is to fit in and catch the ball when he's throwing the football, which if they're going to run the football a lot with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, that may be few and far between. And we've seen concentration issues with Deontay Johnson. If he's not involved in this offense, his head is going to go elsewhere. So I'm not banking on Deontay Johnson being much of anything in this Ravens offense, truthfully. He's there along for the ride. And if he happens to catch a pass that changes the tide of a game, more power to him. And it's going to hopefully help his stock in free agency next year. But this is still Flowers. It's Bateman. And as long as Isaiah Likely's out, it's Mark Andrews.
Deontay Johnson might be a real life handcuff because he can play the role of Bateman or Flowers in this offense, but they're not going to ask him to do either while they have it. So plain and simple. And then Josh, just to get us out of here with Noah Brown, out there in a bunch of leagues, week 14 bye. He's come on as of late. Nothing like huge pop game outside of, the fucking Hail Mary from hell for us Caleb Williams believers. But Noah Brown's slow and steady wins the race almost.
Yeah, the last 3 weeks, he is tied for the team lead with a 23% target share. And the fun part about this is the tie that he's with is not with Terry McLaurin. It's actually with Zach Ertz at the tight end position. But Daniels is not afraid to throw the football, plain and simple. And, he's not just taking off. I think he only had 5 rushing yards this past week, 202 yards passing. So there's value with Noah Brown. He's sort of become this number 2 option really among the wide receivers, where Olamide Zaccheaus sort of started the year in that role. And we've seen good Noah Brown weeks. He had some pop weeks in Houston back in the day. You're starting to kind of see this with Washington as well. There's value in someone like Noah Brown, especially against these, tougher offenses. And I'll go to Thursday night. Yes, the Eagles pass defense has been really good this season, but Washington's going to have to throw to keep up with this Eagles offense. So as long as they have to throw, Noah Brown is going to get looks.
Yeah. Guys, that's going to wrap up wide receivers. I'm going to knock out your questions. We're going to knock out tight ends and defense, but I'm going to do the questions first. I'm going to go actually to the last question. Steven, I just went and checked the timestamps. We did this at about the 3.5 minute mark. We don't have a great baseline of what this offense is going to look like. Thomas Brown tends to be decent for running backs. We think this is a great thing for DeAndre Swift. I kind of threw in there that I think you have to prove you're not Shane Waldron and that you need to let Caleb sling it this week. So I'll be interested. We're not going to tell you we're these great prognosticators of the offense. It has to be better. I don't think it's going to be better for DeAndre Swift, but I don't think it's bad for him. I think DeAndre Swift is good as it is, and there's not going to be a lot that changes with that. So,
yep.
Craig giving himself a shout out, 7-3, taking the league lead. Congratulations. I'm going to guess this is still that standard league, Josh. I think I'd rather have Flowers and Downs than Shakir in a standard league, plain and simple.
100%.
So.
Yeah, the uptick with Shakir, Amari Cooper was out, Keon Coleman was out, Dalton Kincaid got hurt mid-game.
Yeah. George is working out his trade here. I actually love this trade, seeing it on paper. You kind of gave us the parts separately, but seeing it on paper, I'm making this trade all day.
Yeah, I would do that, yeah.
Yeah, Bijan and Ridley is
for that, absolutely.
Yeah, make that trade as quickly as you can, George. I like that a lot. Quincy Davis has Debo and Juwan Jennings and CeeDee Lamb. Would we start any of them over Mooney this week because of the matchup? I'm not benching Darnell Mooney. I don't care that they're playing Denver. I'm not benching Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, there's Darnell Mooney is not going to see Patrick Surtain. So honestly, that betters his case because you figure that Surtain's going to be all over London if he plays. So
yeah, I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to Football Guys, not a sponsor, but I work for them and we like their tools.
They could be a sponsor. Get on the horn.
Yeah, say maybe I need to do that. But I'm going to take a quick look at what Denver has done against the wide receiver over their last 5 games, because I know they've been good against the wide receiver. See, they're middle of road in their last 4 games. And then you had DeAndre Hopkins score 9 points against them. Obviously, that was a little bit of a rough week. Zay Flowers scored 29. 2 weeks ago, Coker and Leggett both hit double digits. Cedric Wilson and Mason Tipton both hit double digits. I think Darnell Mooney's going to be just fine. Don't let the matchup freak you out too much in this one at all. I think that is it for the questions.
Yeah, and right now I'm not starting CeeDee Lamb at all. So
yeah, I was going to say, I think Lamb is vegetable. All right, Josh, I always lump tight ends and defense together. So I'm going to start with the tight ends, go to the defense, but we're not going to take questions in between here. So tight ends, these are the guys that we have listed as available. None of them were good enough to make Britt's article. Josh, as long as T. Higgins is out, Mike Gesicki should be out there. He does have a week 12 bye, 55% available. We like Jonnu Smith, 70% available. Pat Freiermuth, 50% available. These 2 guys are both on bye, but their usage has been so interesting lately. Jatavian Sanders and Theo Johnson, both rookies, both available in 95% of leagues, just played each other, both on bye because of the Germany game. Dawson Knox, there's a big contingency here. Dalton Kincaid needs to be out. He's got a week 12 bye for Knox. Basically, that means Knox is a 1-week rental. He is a stream, and that's it. And then Zach Ertz, as Josh mentioned, leads the team in targets over the last 3 games, 55% available. Josh, if you had to pick one of these guys, who are you prioritizing? Because I know we've kind of been in and out on Gesicki as a player, but T. Higgins is out. He seems to be the second wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing with Dawson Knox, right? Like, if Kincaid is out, we love Knox. If T. Higgins is out, we love Gesicki. We don't know if T. Higgins is out right now. Like, we know he's missed the last 2 weeks. He could very well come back this week. I'm just not a big fan of blowing waiver priority on maybes, right? Yeah. I would much rather prioritize Jonnu Smith, because right now Tua and the Dolphins offense really isn't targeting the wide receiver. This was a pretty underwhelming game on Monday night from a passing volume anyway. And Jonnu Smith still had a pretty decent game. So that tells me that they want to get this guy more involved in this offense. And they're really not looking Jalen Waddle's way. He led the team this week. A lot of that was the wrist injury with Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill ended up catching a touchdown, but only 16 yards receiving. Like, they didn't really need him more than anything. But they went to Jalen Waddle pretty early and often in that game and helped move the sticks. But Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane are really the guys that they're looking for in this offense right now. So I would much rather, sneak in on Jonnu Smith and get that going. But another guy that I really like, I'm really starting to like Jatavian Sanders in this Panthers offense. Like, he's getting some usage. He caught his first touchdown in Germany this week. Hopefully this isn't a Kyle Pitts situation where he can catch balls overseas, but not in the U.S.
And now he doesn't have a touchdown for 2 seasons.
Yeah, right. But again, like, with a lot of young pass catchers, we just talked about Jalen Coker and Xavier Leggett. Jatavian Sanders could ultimately end up being a safety valve. And when you have a quarterback like Bryce Young, who really isn't throwing the ball downfield a ton, that's going to set up Jatavian Sanders for a lot more volume in a PPR setting.
Yeah. And if you guys want some insight on how I'm handling it, I have Sam Laporta, who is likely to miss week 11. I prioritize Pat Freiermuth. I like what I'm seeing out of Russ, and Baltimore hasn't been great against tight ends. So there's some gold in those.
Freiermuth caught a touchdown this week, didn't he?
He did. Yep, absolutely. Looking at the defenses, as always, I am only going to talk to you guys about week 11. These are the ones with the good matchups. I have 8 teams I actually like this week, 5 that I like a lot. You have the Texans taking on Dallas. We've talked about that offense being a dumpster fire. The Browns and New Orleans are both available in more than 50% of leagues. I like both defenses in this matchup. There should be plenty of turnovers with no wide receivers on the Saints side and Jameis Winston on the Browns side. The Dolphins get the Raiders. The Dolphins defense have played pretty well this season, and they play better with Tua out there.
They kept the Rams in check.
They kept the Rams in check. It's going to be a lot easier to keep the Raiders in check. And then the Packers are actually still a top 5 fantasy defense. They get Chicago. I did make this list before Shane Waldron was fired, but I will say it's still probably a pretty decent matchup in Chicago. Don't sleep on the Titans against Minnesota. Lots of turnovers for the Vikings recently. The Rams against New England. New England is a beatable offense. And the Colts against the Jets. The Jets have given up plenty of points, and the Colts are not a terrible fantasy defense. So those are the defenses I'm looking for. I'm prioritizing the Texans, Browns, Saints, Dolphins, and Packers right now on my own leagues, and that's who I would have you guys look for, which actually comes up. Packers defense is on waivers. Would you still play Philly? I would play Green Bay over Philadelphia. I like Green Bay a lot this week. So
there you go.
Quincy has another first place team, Tyrone Tracy on bye. Would we pick up Spears and drop Algier? I think Algier has the upside over. They're the same player, but Algier has the far higher upside if something were to happen to Bijan. I'll hang on to Algier.
Yeah, and Algier's actually getting a lot of red zone opportunities too. So, like one of those rushing touchdowns that Bijan scored, Algier was actually the running back that was in on first and second down to get those red zone touchdowns. Like they wanted to give Algier that touchdown.
Yep.
So, to me, it's just that's where it's at. Spears, again, the usage isn't high enough yet. The passing work is great. Like he's being involved in the passing game. It's just not going for much. So, I would stick with Algier there.
As would I. Quincy needs us to bench one of Jennings, Debo, and Lamb. Josh, I think you said you would do Lamb. I would do Jennings. I'm not going to bench studs yet.
Yes. San Francisco against Seattle this week. That's going to be a big time back and forth. Seattle not afraid to throw the football.
It's a good point.
Obviously, we saw Brock Purdy threw for 350 yards this week.
You know what?
I'm sitting CeeDee Lamb here, truthfully. But again, I will preface this. Ask us again on Saturday during our Start Sit show because there's going to be a lot of new information that'll pop up between now and then. Things could very well sway opinions, but as of right now, I would lean sit CeeDee Lamb because I want nothing to do with anybody on that Dallas Cowboys offense.
There you go. All right, guys, I'm going to run through the rest of the show. If you have questions, get them in right now. And if we can see them before the 22-minute mark, we will answer them. If not, I'm going to ask you to re-ask them tomorrow night. We call it Mayday, Mayday. These are the guys that are droppable. I only look at players that are available, are rostered in more than 30% of leagues. If it's under 30, those people just aren't paying attention right now. Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, 58% rostered. Caleb Williams, 47% rostered. We can talk about him. Tua Tagovailoa, 46%. Jalen Waddle, 88%. I don't care what he did last night. I'm still dropping him. Xavier Worthy, 81%. That was asked about earlier in the show. Definitely droppable. Keenan Allen, 73%. Christian Watson, 45%. Josh, in a 14-team league with Russell Wilson on waivers, you have Geno Smith. I'm not asking for a friend. I'm asking for myself. Are you going to cut Caleb Williams or are you going to wait and see what this offense is all about now?
Oh, I will cut Caleb Williams to go get Russ. I don't care.
Okay.
Russ is producing. He's 3-0 and he's scoring touchdowns. Yeah, I'll take Russ.
And then the last one I'll put you on the spot with Jalen Waddle. We have to ask. He did have a pretty decent game last night. Still nothing great.
3 for 57. Is that really decent?
I was going to say. So, and that's basically what he's been doing. I didn't look at his ranking to know if he's like wide receiver 45 yet again. But Waddle.
You want just the week or on the season?
On the week.
I'll pull it up.
Because yeah, this should be interesting because this is what I pointed out is we called Jalen Waddle a wide receiver 5 until Tua gets back. And then the first 2 games with Tua, he was still a wide receiver 5.
He was wide receiver 39 this week.
See, he's not okay. So I'm not even going to ask you.
He scored 0.2 fantasy points above CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, Jalen Waddle, droppable. CeeDee Lamb, not droppable yet. And then Josh, I give you the list of things I'll be watching for in week 11. You tell me if you find any of these interesting. How many interceptions are we going to see in the Minnesota-Tennessee game? We got quarterbacks that are loving the turnover right now. Can Justin Herbert versus Joe Burrow come anywhere close to what we saw this past Thursday night in Burrow versus Lamar Jackson? Such a fun game. Does CMC pop in week 2? Is it only going to take him one game now? Is he going to go off against Seattle? Do we get another Kansas City versus Buffalo Classic? Can George Pickens be Jamar Chase light against that Baltimore team? How many QB rushing guards in that Philly-Washington game, though? I heard you mention Jaden Daniels only had like 5 yards last week, so I don't love that question anymore. Do we see Anthony Richardson back under center for the Colts against the Jets? Obviously, Tyler does not think that should be happening. Is this going to be a CJ Stroud bounce back game? Or does Micah Parsons just give the kid nightmares? Jameis Winston revenge game against the Saints could be fun to watch. After a up and down week, not a lot of utilization, and I think he was affected by that wrist injury. Do they just give Tyreek Hill a week off against the Raiders? They probably don't need him this week. And after a little bit of a lull for Kyron Williams, now he gets a very poor run defense against the New England Patriots. How many rushing TDs could we see out of Kyron Williams this week? Any of that jumping out?
I thought DeAndre Swift was going to do well against the Patriots, but what the fuck do I know?
That's true.
No, I do think Kyron Williams definitely bounces back. I think, he's going to be your 2 touchdown special this week, isn't he?
Almost certainly. I haven't dug into it yet, but almost certainly.
I definitely think that Parsons can give CJ Stroud some nightmares. Stroud has really looked like a rookie this year where he didn't last year.
That kid for Dallas last week, Deshaun over something that was playing Overshone, who was playing with Parsons, ended up sacking Jalen Hurts twice and then like forced a fumble. That kid might miss this week. If that kid was playing, I would pray for CJ Stroud this week because they got.
I definitely don't think we see Anthony Richardson against the Jets. Let's not forget, this is a revenge game for Joe Flacco.
Oh, that's right.
Also, the Jets defense is ass, straight up.
Yeah.
Like they've been bad since firing Robert Saleh. So I'm not going in on that. But honestly, I think I might have to put George Pickens on the thumbnail this week for Wednesday's show.
I think
that's going to be you know what? I have to put him as a top 10 option this week just so that Joe can like brag and be like, oh, I told you. Like, I'll give him his flowers.
Yeah, I was going to say, Joe loves when you talk well of Pickens and Ladd McConkey. He gets really excited when you talk those guys up. All right.
Sometimes you just have to do things to appease the masses, right?
Exactly.
And by masses, I mean Joe's massive ego.
Quincy gets the last question of the show. Josh, would you drop Tank Bigsby for Tyler Algier?
I'm not doing this because I don't know how serious the Bigsby injury is. It doesn't seem like it's serious, truthfully.
I also think Travis Etienne is going to take more over that backfield. I think I would, Quincy, just throwing it out there. I like Algier a lot. Guys, that's going to be the show. We will be live again tonight for our Dynasty Trade Show, but we have live shows 5 days a week. We do shows 6 days a week. If you're looking for more from me and Josh, you're going to get that tomorrow night for no pun intended. New time. We are 9 p.m. Eastern, but then we have more Dynasty shows, more DFS shows, and more importantly, the show that I wanted to point out that Josh just told you guys about. Every Saturday, we do a start-sit show from 11 a.m. Eastern to noon Eastern, where all we do is answer your questions. No show sheet, no waivers. I mean, unless you ask about waivers, we literally just answer your questions for an hour straight with some of the best guests in the industry. If there was something you didn't get a chance to ask us today, or if you're not watching this show live, make sure you don't miss that Saturday show. We're going to take great care of you. Good luck on your waiver claims tonight. For Josh, I'm Ryan. We'll see you guys next Tuesday for this show, and me and Josh will see you guys on Wednesday night, 9 o'clock. Have a good one.